All right, thank you everyone for joining this business models working group session. Today is Monday, August 17th, and today we are privileged to be able to tune into a presentation by Rodrigo and Philip. It's one on business models and compiling everything that we've been discussing with this group over the past few weeks. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Philip to get us started.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to share what we've been compiling and thinking about the business models. So we've been encouraged with a working group here in order to put all this together, so it will be easier for us to analyze and try to apply all of this concept to our decentralized applications. And we have discovered that everything is quite new in the world. So then, whatever we do in order to advance and organize the information and knowledge, and we create knowledge, that will be wonderful to put it all together. So Rodrigo, he's Rodrigo Tapia. He's the strategic development of Paradigma. We are developing right now that's called Paradigma Crosscheck, and I'm the CEO of Paradigma, the company that is developing that application. So Rodrigo starts with the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I will try to go as fast as possible through it because some of the parts are already known to us. We can call it as an advanced group already. So there we go. Basically, before we start anything, we have to obviously see if there are any problems anywhere. So because obviously we want to try to solve them. So these problems are very well known by the group and by the community, but it doesn't mean that we should just go through them very quickly, but we just mention them now right now. So what are the problems that we encounter? So big web companies lock users into proprietary interfaces for expansion and information monopoly. And we have the problem of centralized information, the lack of privacy, little wealth distribution, and high security risk in many software. No data ownership, free versus data ownership is a problem. Centralized payment systems are also inaccessible. Subscriptions are done by services like SaaS, user licenses, and we in fact compete more than we actually collaborate. So they're the swap, and then oops, there we go. So we are here. We encounter the blockchain and we encounter the decentralized systems, and the basic, I think the word that I always gets to me is basically the possibility that this kind of systems enables the transaction of value. That is, for me, actually the most important part. I think that we can. So we go on further, and then we encounter one of the examples as a model that we already have gone through, but I think it is good to have a review and focus on all the parts of it. Why? Because basically, just like a framework of a picture, you need the 4 parts of the framework to hold the picture, but you don't know exactly what the picture is until you obviously have the framework. And this is basically a framework just like any other framework could be. And we tend to believe that this is a good framework to understand part of our problems and understand the future development. And we will see that together with, later on, probably not now, but we will dive in a little bit into that, in that networks are obviously a part of that and influence a lot the way this flywheel takes place. So basically, we have again the parts of that, and it's a multi-system. It's a multi-sided system affected by many contributors, but also users, investors, miners, and third-party developers. All these form basically a big flywheel that again, is related to, it is influenced by the developers as such, and we see developers at the background influence that, but the users too, and the investors too. Important here to note is that if we zoom into, if we start zooming into all the parts of it, we see that, for example, that the founders define the culture as a primary, possibly as the primary goal of founders is not only to do the application, or to put the technical part of it, but it's also influence. I personally note that as we have this coming together, we can see that there is a sense of culture within the group. Mind you, I have a, that's just a note, I'm an organizational psychologist by trade. So I do take very much care that, that the fact that community affects us, and in fact, it leads to the institutionalization of the process. So that is a very, very important task that founders and core team has as such. Now, if we look at that in a wide perspective, we might see that it is basically like an invisible layer that serves as a glue between people, bringing coherence to their behavior, adding meaning to their life and existence as a community. And that is basically a structure around and everywhere it's basically permeated through in protocols and in the way we speak, in the way we act, in the way we develop something, in the goals we have. It's all around. It's all around. So we need to pay attention to our day-to-day tasks, to how the culture affects us as such, and if to see if that culture is having a positive effect or a negative effect into development or whatever we are trying to develop. Going further, if we go into the investors and we focus on that, this is a particular interesting point at this minute in the development of the application and of Blockstack as such, where we see an incredible increment in all what's DeFi and all what is DeFi as applications could be, and among others, obviously we have the HODL and we have the idea of the HODLing, but much other there are a lot of other developments going on in this area, which is vital, and we will see that this as a part of the actual kickstart of the system. Obviously is a very, very important part to get it running. But we do have to ask ourselves questions every time. Are there new investment mechanisms coming into the market? So what are people doing? What is Ethereum platform doing? Are all investors welcome? Do we want only one type of investor? So we want somebody that only cares for the ecosystem or whatever. So are investors rewarded appropriately? Do we attract investors in some way actively? So there are a lot of questions that we do have to ask, because that is a fundamental part, and probably is an inherent part of the first steps, baby steps of Blockstack towards network compounding. So the next step is to ask ourselves in terms of capturing value, what exactly does a token mean to us, and what is the purpose of it as such in the whole system? So I just made a short summary of what I believe it was on the right side. If we look at stacks and I look at Ether or Bitcoin or Link or Zcash or Tether, we see that particularly some aspects of it are relevant or more relevant than others. So stacks will be, in my belief, how I interpret this, that it's very much involved to the aspect of SEC and the transparency of it. Ether obviously has already, because they started with it, they are the smart contracts creators. Obviously, there are others, but they do get the first because they were the first in doing that, I guess. Bitcoin, we can do that, an interpretation of Bitcoin as being the gold, or sometimes even the gold standard in these kind of systems. Who knows how that will develop further, but it's that is a very relevant aspect. Link in this category will be a kind of API, which would be the connection between platforms or in between apps, and it's going up rapidly. This is a coin that I looked at it a few months ago, and I said, wow, this is a very good idea. And I think, so when I was looking at it, it was $3 US, I believe, and now it's around 20. So it really made a jump. Seed catch is basically anonymity. I think this is one of the possibilities. But there are other coins obviously doing this. But this is just an example. Tether. Tether is a tether, and we're going to see stability that resembles or gives stability to the system. Again, I do think that this is a very important type of coin, because whatever it is created, there must be something that provides stability to the system, be it holding it, be it a system that allows not to be fluctuating up and down so much. So going further, another aspect that we looked upon already was the aspect of incentives. And incentives are incredibly important to guide the community as such. So, but we're not looking directly, like we have seen before with the mechanism of Sam Williams, is that we're not looking directly just to put the carrot in front of the person, but we do want a byproduct effect as a result, which is obviously a positive effect. That is possibly what we are looking for. We are not just looking for the carrot effect, because that would be too simplistic probably. So, and now getting into the network effects, I think this is a fundamental part of it. And I said to Jenny that we were going to talk about networks, but then in the discussion we got with Philip, I think that it was good to go through this before we understand what the effect of networks and the effect of the flywheel all together, so we can put the two things together and understand it much better. And actually I'm diving into the thing of the networks, and it's incredibly, yeah, it's bringing a little bit of light in things that I didn't understand before. So I do think understanding networks is incredibly interesting and powerful. We will see that later. So in this case, we have, again, the traditional network effect and the token network effect. And this is what we always, we were always talking about, no? That we, in the traditional system, we have this bootstrapping problem where we cannot really kickstart the project. So we need to push the system how, and it's very costly. It costs a lot of money to do so. And well, and after, if anybody has a success with that, it obviously brings benefits with that, because once you are in the network, when you are creating your system is created a network effect, you have a lot of utility for the user. And in that respect, is the simple explanation is the first phone. What if you don't have another caller? Obviously, it doesn't work. But once every caller comes to the new caller comes to the system, it becomes much more important and interesting. And on the other side, we have the token network effect, which is kickstart by the financial utility, and that is why the financial utility is primarily at the beginning of the development bigger than in the normal traditional network effects. So, but that decreases afterwards. Relatively, I would say a relative decrease in the sense that it would become more difficult to do so. And the application utility follows the same line as the traditional network effect utility, which means that once the financial utility has been helped to kickstart the development, it should also obviously have to help cross the critical mass of the network, which is what we want. Once we pass the critical mass, the effect becomes interesting. Let's see. If we zoom into, I don't know. I think
this is my turn now.
Sorry. Okay.
So the basic ecosystem now requires the way that it's been established is that there's some miners or validators. They can be called miners because it's a way to put the tokens in use. So in the case of a basic blockchain network, the way to validate or to define that a token or transaction has been done correctly is by the use of miners. And then on the right hand side, you can see the different types of proof of work, proof of transfer, proof of burn, proof of stake, proof of stacking, staking, all that. And so then what the Blockstack had invented is a mix of different of this proof of work with a proof of burn and a proof of stake, and has developed a new version of proof of transfer using the Bitcoin blockchain network as a way to validate the Blockstack network. So in that sense, this concept of miners validator, it's an open and clear for everybody how this is done. That's an important aspect of the thing. So the validation is for anybody that has follows certain rules and is open to somebody to do that. So it's open for the public in order to really audit on and see what's going on that. No? So that's one important aspect that everybody will trust that that presentation will be there. Then look into what this ecosystem has. This platform functionality. So also additionally to what we have in the ecosystem, there's certain basic functionalities that we have to achieve, you see. And so then in the basic platform, we have, in this case of token creation, we can embedded mining delegation in the case of Blockstack. We have clarity embedded in the platform functionality, proof of transfer, and also all backed up in the Bitcoin as a security measure. So all that is embedded that. But this same concept will come back again. Then talking about the user applications of course we have all this functionality, network robustness and security and range. So what about the range of applications? Then the range of application is essential in order to have attraction for users. So then that's why all this effort to attract third-party developers in order to bring new applications. So there will be more end users using this ecosystem. So if we don't have this useful application, then we won't have this utility, you see. So on the right hand side, you can see that probably then all these aspects of what are we going to consider? You know, we have to see ways of using the stacks. You know, there have to be new business models. Which are the apps that will have to use these business models? What are the interests of the developers? How to integrate them into this ecosystem? So then, here the case of the Blockstack ecosystem, then we have several of these dApps already in place that are coming up, and as the main net is coming in a few coming months, then will be actually the real use of the blockchain, Stacks blockchain. So what are these applications used for what? Then you have the, as I said, the value, the financial aspect, and also you have the utility aspect. So those are the aspects that we have to use. Which are the, so we need this third-party developers in order to develop the user application and to attract the end users. So what do we know about the users? How to keep them? You know, and then there's been a lot of discussion about, you know, how to increase these users. Should we grow us very fast, or we should know what exactly they know? And this is traditionally a typical way of doing the application. That's something that in software engineering has been for a long time, for at least, you know, 30 years or 40 years of development, that those practices are applied as a useful way. So one of the aspects that we can
yes.
do is, okay, which is the models of a typical application or typical business model?
Yeah. Thank you, Philip. I will go on with the actual types of business models that we can apply. I just have chosen one. It doesn't mean, again, that this is the system that we have to take. By no means. It's just an idea just to try to structure the information that we have. So why IKEA? Because IKEA is an interesting business model. The stores are operated, like I say, operated via franchising agreement that will pay a 3% franchise fee. On the other hand, the franchises, the stores paying the fee to enter IKEA system, have an exchange the right to operate the stores on the IKEA concept and the IKEA brand. And this is the interesting part. Thus, they gain access to systems, methods, and procedures that go from staff training, manuals, store layout, display concept, and so on. This is obviously also something that in our system, it could be similar or partially similar. But it's interesting to know also that this group of IKEA has been a very, very successful group. And this is one of the reasons why I have put this here. And this is, again, the same overview of what they provide, actually, because you have the financial assets and management in this case, and they have commercial and corporate communication, people and culture, and etc. Sustainability, expansion. So they do look at a lot of things, what the actually group is doing, which actually you can see is a kind of a two-way system in one or three-way system, where you have these guys running. On the other side, you have the sellers and the clients. And in that sense, we can try to, let's say, visualize what aspects we take from here, you know? So legal and governance integration, the commercial integration, advertising and marketing under a Blockstack governance of a Blockstack kind of guidance, whatever form it might take, you know, even people and culture, and even management of rewards and how that should go more or less according to certain rules. So that's a possibility. After that, I try to integrate this with other aspects, which has to do with the actual development of an application. And by no means, again, this is not the only way. It's just a straightforward 1, 2, 3 kind of steps to kickstart your own development. So fundraise, build product, issue token, integrate token, launch the app, and list it in Blockstack or whatever other place it could be. So it is nothing more than that, because not only it has to be has to be a platform development. There must be also a structured form of way of developing the dApps as such and helping people develop their dApps in certain way. This is your part.
Well, essentially, as we have seen, the two types of opportunity to capture value for developers. One is to develop a full stack application, or could be the protocol. So the base protocol is built on the as an infrastructure. So then it's based off Stacks 2.0 plus Clarity, and then you, with the smart contract services based in Clarity, you can develop the different types of protocols to do different functionalities, and that could be your dApp or your development. So then you need other developers in order to use that those services based on protocol, or one can do the full stack. And that requires also an application layer plus the protocol layer, that all the programs that you have already developed, and that is being used by the application layer. But also could be an integration among third parties, developers of other dApps that also could use those services. So, and on top of that is a wallet. So that's the two ways for developers to integrate into the ecosystem. So then, having this thought about that how you develop, then you have to think about how you're going to develop this application and which are the steps that on the left-hand side you see the Blockstack as a base of the ecosystems and the different aspects that you need into your application. But not only that, but also you have to think about the revenues that you're going to get. So then how that is going to finance your application. And then, from that, at the same time, on the right-hand side, you can see that okay, if you develop a new dApp, then you have to have all this process of fundraising, build a product, issue tokens. So not only the development of an application as a typical utility that we've been used to do in the past, also we have to think about how you're going to issue the tokens, how you're going to integrate this token, how this is going to work. And when there's one aspect that was mentioned before, in order to take advantage of the to compensate the network effect, is to use the financial utility of the tokens. So then on the bottom, then the reputation and lending and incentives in order to use your application will change the way that of the success of your application. So it's not only the utility, but also the incentive that you put in place in order to develop an ecosystem. So then the ecosystem at the end will be something like a decentralized autonomous organization, a DAO. So then the reward systems is something that is not so easy to understand, and then that's been a lot of discussion. What are the settings? What role plays culture in settings? What's the role of governance in terms of reward and business culture creation? And then how do we make ecosystem more simple? Is there a sweet spot between rules and no rules? So all that management and reward of integration, how we're going to do all these incentives, and then depending on the number of factors and the complexity of the environment, the non-rules the complexity will be increased. So, or reduced if we do an intervention. Next. So going back to the flying wheel, then you see that one aspect that we've been covering all the aspects, and then the binders or validators of an ecosystem. So all that, and we have covered the founders and all that, but also there's another layer that comes up with when you develop and adapt, and that is the previous one. We have been talking about the basic block stamps ecosystems, but right now it's the DApp ecosystem. So each DApp could be an ecosystem. So in the sense that each one could have a token, and each one would have a validator and all that. So we're going to see that in the case of a DApp that has the protocol layer business model. So the protocol layer, these are the type of business model we can have: the subscription, SaaS, transaction fee, royalty fee, building cost modes, vertical integration like supply siders, user staker, leveraging tokens to distribute value and upside to users, crypto collateralized loans. Those are some of the business models that can be associated with the protocol layer. Next one. But then in the full stack applications model, that is also, there's not so much experience in the world right now in this level. It's been more on the previous layer. But then we can provide some specific service across many interfaces and the apps on the top share and data with no centralized platform risk. Those are the aspects, like the business model of decentralized finance, like money Legos that have been providing services and the infrastructure, and also some applications that you can integrate to your application layer. Or DAOs, that what we have seen, or the games and scene applications. Those are some full stack applications that have been developed right now. Next one. So, but one of the aspects that we have to think about is if we build all this, what is the purpose of this? You see. So then, for a quote that was written in 1912, this is the supreme need of humanity is cooperation and reciprocity. So then the stronger the ties of fellowship and solidarity amongst men, the greater will be the power of constructiveness and accomplishment in all the planes of human activity. Without cooperation and reciprocal attitude, the individual member of human society remains self-centered and inspired by altruistic purposes, limited and solitary in development, like the animal and the plant organism of the lower kingdoms. So essentially, we have to envision that cooperation and reciprocity has to be in order to really bring solidarity, fellowship, and have greater power of constructiveness and accomplishment. It has to be integrated in our business models. So then, this cooperation reciprocity has to be built in our DApp ecosystem. So on the right-hand side, then, as you see, our community becomes the safeguard of quality and production as shareholders. And we want to have a healthy and prosperous business ecosystem causing as byproduct and stimulation for common. So on the right-hand side, you see the different user tokens that we can develop. And in case of our application, then it's okay. For example, one value that we want to have is doing business trustfully, for example. But then each DApp will have a different value that we want to have that in their community. But that community is for your DApp, but it's based off another ecosystem that is as a base, that is the Blockstack ecosystem. Tokens then must represent an intrinsic value such as quality, performance, activity, design. And you see here, then all the aspects that we've been discussing has to be considered in the development of this application, and also the ecosystems, and also the community associated with this application.
Yeah.
So then in terms of token value, then, okay, you see the values that how that it will be defendable of your ecosystem. Of course, we've been discussing how to do that, but that's something that we have to understand, this concept of cooperation, reciprocity. Because if we don't understand those aspects, then we don't understand our users. So what are the token values that we want to reflect? Next one.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Sorry, Rodrigo, just quickly, I want to flag that we only have a few minutes left. We can continue with the presentation and discussion. Since I've made both of you co-hosts, I think some of us just need to leave at 11:45.
Okay. So yeah, we can basically indeed try to see the future of it. I will try to sum up everything fast here. So we indeed have to try to see what kind of. Personally, I do believe that the tokens are going to be very, very important to define the way we do things, and it's basically the way. It's kind of it becomes a little bit like a logo of a company. We transmit actually the purpose of what are you exactly doing. But nevertheless, within the ecosystem and within Stack itself, there are a couple of things that potentially are going to be important to develop. A kind of a stability coin, a kind of gold coin, a kind of API coin, and obviously the transparency coin. So, or maybe are all together in one, but also the possibility that are separately developed. And that's it. Sorry for that. That took too long, but.
That's all right. Thank you so much for that really thorough presentation, you guys. I know that you've done a lot of research in addition to what we've discussed in this group to put this together. So I guess for now we can open it up to discussion. Like I said, we have until 45, but you can go for longer if you choose to continue discussion. Some of us may just need to hop off in about 5 minutes or so. But I saw some questions and some comments in the chat, so I'll open it up to everyone else for discussion.
Okay.
Okay, so there was a question about what is this the difference with the stacks from the others. So then essentially what we see that the values are the ones that have been taken already, and then we have to see that if that is sufficiently useful for the community, you know? And then one of the aspects that stacks have been useful is as transparent, and is the first token that been taken as approved by the SEC. You see, but then probably there will be other values that will have to be considered in order to get the trust of the community. And then there was another question about, you know, what about competition? So then if we see that the quote from 1912 of Abdul Baha, they mention also this qualities of cooperation and reciprocity also seen in nature. So nature is something that we see that in places that there's no sufficient water, then some aspects, you know, the competition, you know, in order to grow is so high that there's no vegetation. So then in a jungle, then the competition to grow is bigger because there's a very in a place that has a lot of opportunity to grow and to work together with others in order to achieve their, you know, the objectives. Insects are there. So the thing is, competition could be like a cancer, or could be something like that we all win. So it will be more on co-opetition than competition.
Yeah, I do absolutely think that competition takes a part of it. As such, I think the hackathon kind of concept is absolutely valid, and it should be absolutely integrated, because basically what you do, and actually what I think it's happening, will happen, is that um, um, you have we probably the development of dApps will have three phases, and that has to do with the network effect. One being, the first effect being the phase of the promotion as such, or the financial aspects, and there in hackathon or in or trying to push with financial means something forward is absolutely valid. But as we go along in the development, we might have the need to develop other things. So there is a kind of a structure, way forward, I think.
So there's an opportunity to embed, because that's the claim with blockchain. It's an opportunity to embed and to build the possibility of putting this cooperation reciprocity in place in our applications. That's something that we didn't have before. Because in terms of just payments, well, we have all the credit cards, we have the ways of payment like that, and probably that's so there's a lot of value given that from the blockchain. But the most important aspect is not only that, it's the possibilities of building these incentives. So this concept of proof of HODL is a way of also creating incentive, very simple incentives, in order to create new bases of development of applications and ways to create new areas, new jungles, new harvest, or whatever names so that we can do different types of products and things like that. So that's why we have been working so much in trying to understand this business model, because it's so powerful. So if we don't, and when, like a small survey we made, in only 5% of the project what we saw they're considering this aspect of the business model as an ecosystem, a multi-sided ecosystem. So they're not taking in account the concept that you can really build reward systems using this blockchain infrastructure.
There's
time.
Yeah,
it's time.
So, Philip, there's an interesting question regarding the fact that network effects leading to monopoly would create tremendous competition and not cooperation. I think there's an obvious network effect that is not different than previous network effect. Why should it be different is the question, no? But meaning that the network effects created by the fact of compounding, by the fact that more people are integrated into one system, is not one-sided, let's say, or two-sided. It's multi-sided. By that, the effect is different, because then the effect is created by the intrinsic working out the problems together. And that makes the defensibility of the system strong. If there is no way, if there is no cooperation between the apps and the dApps and the platform, then basically the other side is also valid, a chaotic system with nobody coordinating anything. So that's why we talk about the sweet spot, a sweet spot which allows a kind of guidance on one side, but on the other side, leading to a good cooperation and trying to find the win-win solutions between us.
But we have to discover that, how to avoid that monopoly. And we can build a monopoly if you want, but then we have the way of not building a monopoly. Before, we didn't have that opportunity.
Any other questions?
Well, the application could be a monopoly, each one, but if you allow also development outside your application, could be something that also creates an ecosystem that has the same attributes. I think that is quite a challenge. So do we have, at least we have to understand how we have to do that. And then we have to create the incentives in order to do that. Thank you very much for the opportunity to share in this presentation.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Thank you. So that's it.
Hey, thank you so much. Will we be able to get a copy of the presentation afterward?
Sure.
Absolutely.
I would love that. I took some notes and I appreciate you guys.
I didn't hear that. Sorry.
Yeah, but we're going to share that, and also the video will be available. So, you know, Jenny is going to post it in a working group probably, or somewhere else. So thank you very much. We did it also in Spanish and before. So this is our first one in English. So sorry about the some use of words, and that's been difficult sometimes.
That was great. Is anyone else speaking today?
Not sure.
Is Frieger, are you doing any updates, or Jenny, do we have time for that or not really? Jenny's still on. Maybe Jenny's
This is Dennis on. Well,
okay. I think we are still recording. We're recording from Rodrigo's screen. Frieger, all right, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can.
Do you have time to give an update?
Maybe it's a bit short if we finish at 6.
Okay. Up to you.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
I would prefer next time.
Sounds good. Cool. So we'll wrap up.
okay.
All right. Great chat.
Thank you very much.
See you all.
See ya.
Bye.